You want to know about the day it all fell apart? No. You need to understand the days when it was all still whole. You have to see the sun before you can comprehend the depth of the night. For me, the sun had a name. Leo. Leo was 6 years old, a pocket-sized hurricane of freckles, scraped knees, and a laugh that could disarm a bomb. His sister, Chloe, was 4, with solemn brown eyes and a habit of clutching a worn-out stuffed rabbit named Barnaby, as if he held the secrets of the universe. They were my universe. After Sarah, after the cancer took her, they were all I had left. My anchor in a world that had gone suddenly, brutally quiet. I was Julian Thorne. You might have seen the name on a building downtown or in the business section. Thorne Industries. I built it from a college dorm room idea into a global tech giant. It was my fortress, my monument. But my real empire, my true kingdom, was a sprawling modern house on the edge of the city, filled with the sound of my children's laughter. And the architect of that laughter, the one who kept the kingdom running when I was off fighting dragons in boardrooms, was Clara. Clara wasn't just a nanny. She was part of the foundation. She'd been with us since a month after Sarah passed, a quiet, capable storm of a woman in her late 40s with kind eyes and a spine of tempered steel. She found Leo crying in a closet one afternoon, and instead of coaxing him out, she simply sat on the floor outside and told him a story about a brave little knight until he emerged, red-eyed but listening. She knew how to braid Chloe's hair just the way Sarah used to. She remembered that I took my coffee black, with 1 sugar, and that on the anniversary of Sarah's diagnosis, I needed a glass of whiskey left on my desk, no words spoken. She was family. I trusted her with my heart, which was my children. The betrayal, when it came, wasn't born in darkness. It was born on a perfect golden afternoon. A Tuesday. I'd managed to escape the office early, the spring air feeling like a pardon. I pulled my car into the driveway, the silence of the house striking me as odd. Usually, by this time, there was the faint thump of music from Leo Ant's room or the high-pitched narration of Chloe Sitz's play. I walked through the silent, polished halls, my dress shoes clicking a rhythm of mild concern. I found them in the backyard. It was a scene of pure, unadulterated joy, the kind of messy, glorious chaos I, in my structured, grief-hardened life, rarely permitted. Leo and Chloe were in the giant muddy puddle that had formed from a broken sprinkler near the oak tree. They were caked in rich brown earth from head to toe, their expensive clothes rendered into rags. Leo was stomping, sending great arcs of muddy water into the air, his head thrown back in a roar of laughter. Chloe, more tentative, was squatting down, carefully patting mud into a pie on a leaf, her little brow furrowed in concentration. And Clara. Clara was standing right there, watching them, a small, soft smile on her face. She wasn't just supervising, she was approving. She was the curator of this beautiful disaster. I stood at the large glass patio door, my hand frozen on the handle. A part of me, a small, buried part that still remembered how to be a boy, wanted to kick off my shoes and join them, to feel the cool squelch of mud between my toes. But the louder part, the part that was Julian Thorne, CEO, the man who had to control everything because he couldn't control death, saw only the chaos, the mess, the potential for sickness, the disregard for order, for the pristine, sterile environment I had built as a bulwark against the unpredictability of life. I slid the door open. The sound cut through their laughter. 3 faces turned to me. Leo's grin faltered. Chloe's lower lip began to tremble. her muddy hands clutching Barnaby tighter. Clara's smile didn't vanish, but it softened, became placating. "Julian, we were just enjoying the afternoon. It's just a little mud. It washes off." Her tone. It was that tone that did it. The gentle, almost maternal dismissal of my concerns. It pricked at something deep inside me, a place of helplessness I refused to acknowledge. "Just a little mud?" My voice was quiet, cold. I heard it, and I didn't recognize it. "Clara, look at them. They're filthy. They could catch a cold. These are designer clothes, ruined." Leo's face fell. "But Dad, it was so fun. We were making a castle." "Go inside, both of you. Upstairs and straight into the bath," I said, my gaze fixed on Clara. The children scurried past me, leaving trails of mud on the pristine white tiles. The silence they left behind was heavy, broken only by the drip of water from the trees. Clara wiped her hands on her apron, her expression shifting from gentle to defensive. "Julian, they're children. They need to get dirty sometimes. It's good for them." "What they need," I said, each word a chip of ice, "is structure, cleanliness, respect for their things, not to be encouraged to wallow in filth. I pay you to care for them, not to turn my backyard into a pigsty." The words were harsher than I intended, but they were out now, hanging in the air between us. I saw the flash of hurt in her eyes, but it was quickly banked, replaced by a stubborn resolve. "I care for them more than you know," she said, her voice low. "I'm trying to give them a childhood, Julian, not just a showroom existence." That stung. It stung because it felt true. My kingdom was a showroom, a beautiful, empty museum. "Their childhood is my concern," I snapped, "not yours. Your concern is to follow my rules, and my rules do not include mud pies." I took a breath, the corporate part of my brain taking over, seeking a swift, decisive end to the conflict. "I think it's best if you take the rest of the week off, with pay. We'll talk on Monday." It was a dismissal, a royal decree from the king of the castle. Clara looked at me for a long moment. The kindness was gone from her eyes, replaced by something else, something flat and unreadable. She didn't argue. She didn't plead. She just gave a slow, single nod. "As you wish, Julian," she said softly. She turned and walked back into the house, her shoulders straight. I heard her footsteps on the stairs, going to pack her things. I stood there, alone in the backyard, the ghost of my children's laughter still hanging in the air. The mud puddle was already starting to settle, its surface becoming still and dark. I had won the argument. I had reasserted control. So why did I feel like I had just made the biggest mistake of my life? It was a small moment, a disagreement over mud. But as I stared at that dark, reflective pool of water, it felt like I was looking into the first crack in my world. I just didn't know yet how deep that crack would go, or what was waiting to crawl out of it. Monday came. The house was quiet. Too quiet. The children were subdued, asking about Clara with a hesitant fear that made my stomach clench. I told them she was on a break. I told myself the same thing. She didn't come back on Monday. I called her phone. It went straight to voicemail. Her calm, professional tone felt like a mockery. "You've reached Clara. Please leave a message." I didn't. By Wednesday, a low-grade anxiety had set in. It wasn't just about the child care, though the logistics were a nightmare. It was her silence. It was uncharacteristic. Clara was reliable. She was a rock. On Thursday, the rock fell. I was in my home office trying to focus on a multi-million-dollar merger, when my assistant's frantic voice came over the intercom. "Mr. Thorne, there are men here, from the IRS and the SEC. The world tilted. The IRS, the Securities and Exchange Commission. These weren't visitors you got without warning. These were the vultures that circled dying companies. I walked out to the reception area of my corporate headquarters. 3 men in cheap suits stood there, their faces carved from granite. They handed me a sheaf of papers. Words leaped out at me like physical blows. Fraud, embezzlement, insider trading, federal investigation. "This is a mistake," I heard myself say, my voice thin, reedy. "There has to be some error." The lead agent, a man with cold eyes named Dern, gave me a pitying smile. "No mistake, Mr. Thorne. We have a very credible whistleblower, detailed financial records, secret offshore accounts. It's all here." Whistleblower. The word echoed in the hollow of my skull. Back home, the phone started to ring. It was my board of directors. Their voices, once fawning and obsequious, were now sharp with panic and accusation. The news had leaked. Thorne Industries stock was in freefall. The vultures weren't just circling, they were pecking out its eyes. I sat in my darkening living room, the legal documents spread out on the coffee table like a coroner's report. I couldn't make sense of it. The accounts they were talking about, I hadn't opened them. The transactions, I hadn't authorized them, but the evidence was there. My digital signature, transfers from my private server. It was all meticulously fabricated, a perfect poisonous work of art designed to destroy me. Who could have done this? Who had that kind of access? Who knew the intricate private details of my financial and digital life? The answer came to me in a wave of nauseating clarity. Clara. The quiet afternoons she spent in my home office, organizing files. The times I'd asked her to reset my computer password when I'd forgotten it. Her uncanny ability to be a ghost in the machine of my life, knowing schedules, passwords, the rhythms of my security. She had the access. She had the intelligence. But the motive? Why? The next few weeks were a blur of hell. My assets were frozen. The board, in a desperate attempt to save the company, voted me out. My name, once synonymous with innovation and success, was now a punchline on financial news networks. The thorn in Thorne Industries side, but the professional humiliation was nothing compared to the personal collapse. My so-called friends, the ones who had flocked to my charity galas and yacht parties, vanished. My phone, which once buzzed constantly, was a silent, dead weight in my pocket. The final blow came from my own brother, Mark. He showed up at the house, his face a mask of grim duty. The house was in both our names, a technicality from when our parents died, a formality I'd never bothered to correct. "Julian," he said, not meeting my eyes. "The legal fees, the potential fines. If this house is seized, it takes me down with you. I have a family to think about." "What are you saying, Mark?" I asked, my voice raw. "I'm filing a partition action. I'm forcing the sale of the house. I'm sorry, Julian, it's just business." Just business. My own brother. The man I'd given his first job. The uncle who had bounced Leo on his knee. He was throwing us out into the cold to save his own skin. I had nothing. No company. No money. No friends. No family. The fortress I had built had been breached from the inside, and every last defender had fled or turned traitor. The day we had to move out, it was raining. A cold, miserable drizzle that matched the landscape of my soul. Leo and Chloe, confused and scared, clung to my legs as I loaded a few suitcases of our remaining personal belongings into a cheap, rented sedan. We were moving into a cramped two-bedroom apartment on the wrong side of town. The kingdom had been reduced to a rental. I took one last look at the house. The pristine lawn, the sparkling glass, the sterile beauty of it all. It was never a home. It was a tomb. And Clara, she hadn't just been the caretaker, she had been the grave digger. As I drove away, the wipers slapping a monotonous rhythm against the windshield, I looked at my children in the rear-view mirror. Leo was staring out the window, his face pale. Chloe was asleep, her cheek pressed against the cold glass. A cold, hard knot tightened in my chest. This was not the end of me. This was the beginning of something else. The man I was, Julian Thorne, the arrogant, controlling, blind king, was dead. He died in that backyard, staring at a mud puddle, but something else was being born in the ashes of his life, something patient, something relentless. I didn't scream, I didn't cry. I just drove, my hands steady on the wheel, my gaze fixed on the road ahead. One day, Clara. One day, you'll look up from whatever hole you've crawled into, and you'll see me standing there. You won't see the broken man you left in the rain. You'll see who I had to become, and you will understand, too late, the nature of the storm you unleashed. 7 years. That's how long it took. 2,555 days of grinding, relentless, silent work. The man who drove away from that mansion in the rain no longer existed. I had shed him like a skin. I was someone else now, calmer, quieter. The frantic, controlling energy of Julian Thorne had been replaced by a glacial patience. My empire was no longer made of glass and steel, but of code and shadows. I started from nothing, literally. A library computer, a stolen Wi-Fi signal, and a fury so cold it had crystallized into a diamond-hard focus. I taught myself what I needed to know. Cybersecurity, digital forensics, the art of building an identity from dust. I used a new name, Alexander Gray. It felt fitting, a shade of my former self. I didn't rebuild Thorne Industries. I built something far more potent and far less visible, a boutique cybersecurity firm that catered to the ultra-wealthy and the paranoid, the very people who had once been my peers. They didn't know Alexander Gray was Julian Thorne. They only knew I was the best, the ghost who could walk through their digital walls and show them their own vulnerabilities. I became wealthy again, but quietly. My power was not for display. It was a weapon I was sharpening, a single perfect tool for a single perfect task. My children were my only link to the past. Leo, now a brooding 13-year-old with his mother's eyes. Chloe, 11, still quiet, but with a sharp, analytical mind that loved the logic of my new world. We lived a simple life. No mansion, no staff, just us. And in that simplicity, we found a love that the big house had never contained. They were my reason, my compass. And all the while, I searched for her. It took me 4 years just to find a trace. Clara was a ghost. She'd vanished the day she destroyed me. But ghosts leave digital footprints if you know how to look. And I had become the world's foremost expert on finding ghosts. I found her not in a penthouse, not living a life of luxury off my stolen millions, but in a small, unassuming town a few states over. She was living under the name Claire Miller. She'd used the money not to live large, but to build a small, successful chain of upscale children's boutiques. The Gilded Acorn. It was sickeningly quaint. She had become a pillar of her little community, a philanthropist, a beloved local figure. The irony was so thick I could taste it, and it tasted like acid. She had taken everything from me and used it to build herself a life of quiet respectability. A life built on my ruin. The time for watching was over. The time for action had come. My revenge was not going to be a hammer blow. It was to be a slow, meticulous dismantling. A death by 1,000 cuts, each one administered with the calm precision of a surgeon. I started with her business. A whisper in the ear of a competitor about her supposedly shady past. A cleverly designed anonymous online review campaign questioning the sourcing of her products. A strategic leak to a local blogger about irregularities in her early business loans, the seed money that was, in fact, my money. I didn't accuse her of anything directly. I just planted seeds of doubt and watched them grow. Her customer base, the fickle, judgmental upper middle class, began to drift away. The Gilded Acorn's perfect online rating began to slip. I saw the stress in her face in the grainy security camera feeds I occasionally accessed. She was worried, confused. Good. Next, her reputation. I discovered a young, ambitious local journalist hungry for a breakout story. An anonymous tip. A carefully curated packet of documents hinting at a mysterious, wealthy benefactor behind Claire Miller's sudden rise was all it took. The story wasn't an accusation. It was a question. Who is the real Claire Miller? In a small town, a question can be more damaging than an answer. The invitations to charity committees dried up. The friendly nods at the grocery store became strained. I was a ghost in her machine, turning the gears of her life slowly, inexorably against her. I felt no rage as I did it, only a cold, clean satisfaction. This was justice, not vengeance. Vengeance is hot and messy. This was an equation I was solving. Throughout it all, I made sure my children were shielded, loved, and whole. They knew their father worked in computers. They knew we had lost someone once, and that we had fought to get back to a good place. They were resilient, happy. They were my proof that I was not the monster Clara had tried to make me. The final piece of the plan was the most delicate. I needed to get close. I needed to see the whites of her eyes. An opportunity presented itself. The local art gallery, which she supported, was hosting a fundraising gala. The kind of event the town's elite attended to see and be seen. It was the perfect stage. I rented a tuxedo that cost more than my first car. I hired a discreet car service. I looked in the mirror and saw Alexander Gray, confident, successful, enigmatic. Julian Thorne was a faint memory, a ghost haunting another life. The gala was everything I expected. Over-decorated, underwhelming, a room full of small-town royalty playing dress-up, and there she was, Clara. She was standing near a hideous modern sculpture, a glass of champagne in her hand, talking to a couple who were nodding a little too vigorously. She looked older. The lines around her eyes were deeper. She still carried herself with that same quiet authority, but I could see the strain now, the faint tremor in her hand as she lifted her glass, the tightness around her smile. My work had been effective. I moved through the crowd, a predator moving through a herd of oblivious prey. I didn't look at her. I made my way to the bar, ordered a whiskey, neat. I could feel her gaze on my back. A new face, an unknown quantity. In a town like this, I was a disruption. I turned slowly, letting my eyes sweep the room before they landed on her. I allowed a flicker of recognition, of polite curiosity to cross my face. I gave a small, courteous nod. She stared back. Her smile was frozen, but her eyes were doing frantic, terrified calculations. Who was I? Why did I seem familiar? The seed was planted. I took my time, I circulated, I made small talk. I was charming, vague about my work, hinting at private security consulting. I let the mystery around Alexander Gray build. Finally, when the crowd had thinned slightly, I approached her. My heart was not pounding. My breath was even. I was the calm at the center of the storm I had created. "Claire Miller," I said, my voice a low, pleasant baritone. "Alexander Gray, I've heard wonderful things about your work with the Children's Hospital." She took my offered hand. Her grip was cold, slightly damp. "Mr. Gray," she said, her voice a little too high. "A pleasure. You're new to town?" "Just visiting," I said, my smile never reaching my eyes. "Considering some investments. It's a lovely community. It reminds me of where I grew up, actually." I held her gaze, letting the silence stretch for a beat too long. I saw the first flicker of real fear in her eyes, the first dawning, horrifying suspicion. The hook was set. The game was now face to face. She invited me for coffee the following week. Said she could tell me more about the town's investment opportunities. We both knew it was a lie. She was a mouse sniffing at a trap, driven by terror she couldn't name. We met in a quiet, upscale cafe, the same one my research told me she used for all her important meetings. She was trying to control the environment. It was a pathetic gesture. She was already there when I arrived, nursing a latte, her posture rigid. I sat down, ordered a black coffee, 1 sugar. The same way I'd always taken it. I saw her flinch, just slightly, when I gave the order. "So, Mr. Gray," she began, her voice strained. "Let's call it unfinished business," I said, stirring my coffee. "I'm a man who doesn't like loose ends." She forced a smile. "I can understand that. In business, it's always best to tie things up neatly." "It is," I agreed. I took a slow sip, letting the silence become heavy, oppressive. Her face went pale. The spoon in her hand clattered against the saucer. I'm not sure I follow." "Don't you, Clara?" The use of her real name was a physical blow. She recoiled as if I'd slapped her. Her eyes widened, filled with a pure, undiluted horror. "Who are you?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "You know who I am," I said, my voice still calm, almost conversational. "Look closer, past the different haircut, the different clothes. Look at the eyes, Clara. You spent years looking into them." She stared, her breath coming in short, sharp gasps. The color drained completely from her face. "Julian!" The name was a choked exhalation. "No, it can't be. You're gone. You lost everything." "I did," I nodded. "Thanks to you. I lost my company, my home, my friends, my brother, everything but my children. You left me with nothing but them. That was your one mistake." She was shaking her head, a frantic denialist motion. "I had to. You were going to ruin him." The words hung in the air, nonsensical. "Ruin who?" "Elias," she said, the name bursting from her like a confession. "My son." I stared at her, truly bewildered. "I don't know anyone named Elias." Tears began to stream down her face, cutting through the carefully applied makeup. "You did. You just didn't know it. Elias Vance. He worked for you. In the mailroom. He was trying to move up. He had ideas. He was brilliant." A vague, distant memory surfaced. A young, eager kid. Ambitious. I'd spoken to him once, maybe twice. "You fired him," Clara spat, her voice cracking with 7 years of pent-up bitterness. You called him unfocused. A distraction. You threw him out like garbage because he dared to speak to you in the elevator. You ended his career before it even started. He fell into a depression. He took his own life 6 months later. The world seemed to shrink, to focus on her grief-stricken, hate-filled face. The motive. It was all there. Not for money, not for power, for a son. "Clara," I said, my voice soft, and for the first time, I felt a crack in my own icy calm. I never fired anyone named Elias. The mailroom was handled by HR. I wouldn't have even known his name. The fight went out of her. The hatred in her eyes was replaced by a dawning, terrible confusion. "But he told me. He said you looked him in the eye and told him he was worthless." And then I understood. The final, devastating piece of the puzzle. Her son, ashamed of being let go from an entry-level position, had lied to his mother. He'd fabricated a story, making himself the victim of the cruel, powerful CEO to save face. And she, a grieving, furious mother, had believed him. She had crafted her entire revenge on a foundation of a lie. I didn't feel triumph. I felt a profound, soul-crushing emptiness. "He lied to you, Clara," I said, not with anger, but with a weary, infinite sadness. "I never met your son. I am truly, deeply sorry for your loss. But you destroyed a living man for a ghost. You orphaned my children for a second time, for a story." The sound that escaped her was one of pure animal agony. It was the sound of a world collapsing. She had lived for 7 years wrapped in the righteousness of her revenge, and in a single moment I had shown her that it was all for nothing, that the monster she slew was a phantom, and that she had become the true monster. She buried her face in her hands, her body racked with sobs. The other patrons were staring now. I reached into my inner jacket pocket and pulled out a small sealed envelope. I placed it on the table between us. "This is a signed affidavit," I said quietly. "It states that I, Julian Thorne, have uncovered evidence exonerating myself of all past charges, pinning the blame on a digital ghost, an unknown hacker. My name will be cleared. My assets, what's left of them, will be unfrozen." She looked up, her face a ruined mess of tears and smeared mascara. "Why? Why are you telling me this?" "Because my revenge isn't sending you to jail, Clara. It's letting you live. Live with what you've done. Live with the knowledge that your son's memory is now tied to this atrocity. You have to wake up every day in the life you built with my blood and know it is founded on a lie. The gilded acorn is rotten at its core. Your reputation is ash, and you have no one to blame but yourself." I stood up, leaving my full coffee cup on the table. I had said all I needed to say. "My children are happy now," I said, my final words to her. "We have a good life, a real one. I hope, one day, you can find a way to forgive yourself. I doubt I ever will." I turned and walked away. I didn't look back. I heard her broken sob behind me, but I kept walking, out of the cafe, into the clean morning air. There was no victory in it, no soaring sense of triumph, just a quiet, hollow closure. She was a broken woman, and I had been the instrument of her breaking, just as she had been mine. The cycle was complete. I went back to my children, to Leo and Chloe. We ordered pizza that night and watched a stupid movie. Leo laughed at a dumb joke, a real, unforced laugh that reminded me of the boy in the mud. Chloe leaned her head on my shoulder, and it was the greatest weight I had ever carried. I had my name back. I had my fortune returning. But I would never get those 7 years back. I would never get back the trust I lost, the innocence my children shed too early. But I had them, and I had learned the most valuable lesson of all, that control is an illusion, that love is the only real currency, and that revenge, even silent, precise and justified, leaves scars on the one who wields it. I look at my children now, and I see the future. Not a fortress to be built, but a garden to be tended. A life to be lived, with all its beautiful, messy, unpredictable joy.